So in this video I wanted to talk about circular reference errors, and more precisely the interest expense circularity. The circular reference created by interest expense is one of the most common contributing factors to a broken model. I can better illustrate that by deleting revenue for 2012 to show you that your model will ref out. But then even if you undo this error, you will see that your model still does not properly calculate. To fix it, you must first delete interest expense and then relink it to your supporting schedule below. Interest expense is cell D128. And you can then paste that across to fix your model. The reason for this is that interest expense affects net income, which has an impact on free cash flow, which in turn impacts your revolver or line of credit, which, coming full circle, affects interest expense. And you can see that both on the supporting schedule and back on the income statement where we started. Another way to visualize this is to revisit our one-page model. Recall that this is a fully integrated financial statement model. If you were to turn off iterative calculations, which you can do by going to the File menu, selecting Options, then Formulas, and then selecting this box, Enable Iterative Calculation. OK. Excel will immediately notify you that it has identified a circular reference. And when you then select OK, it will show you that circular reference in the model. Here again you can see that interest expense flows to net income, which then impacts your cash balances, which in turn affects your revolver or debt balances, which gets you all the way back to interest expense. And you can see that again on the supporting schedule and income statement. So going back to our model, it's good to find an elegant solution to avoid this or work around it. Remember to check that iterative calculations are turned back on again by going to File, Options, Formulas, and checking the box to enable iterative calculations. And finally, OK. To avoid having to delete and then relinking interest expense to the supporting schedule below, we can add a formula to our income statement which allows us to turn interest expense on and off. To do that, we'll first have to add a toggle, and for that we will need an additional column. To add a column, hit Alt-I-C, and then to make the column a more appropriate width, hit Alt-H-O-W, and you can enter a value of, say, 10. This cell is going to become the toggle for our interest rate circularity breaker. So we can first format it, and hit Alt-H-H to go to background colors, and select pale yellow, and then Alt-H-F-C to change the font to blue, and finally type the letters ON. If you want to center the text, you can hit Alt-H-A-C. Now we're going to be inputting this formula in the interest expense line. You can see that currently interest expense is linked to cell E128. What we're going to do now is use an if statement to incorporate our circularity breaker. What the if statement does is check whether a condition is met, and then either return a value for true or another for false. So first, input your condition or logical test, which for this purpose will be if B21 equals ON. If that's true, then we want to show the value in cell E128 for interest expense. And if it's false, we want to show a value of 0 to turn off interest expense and kill the circularity. Now that we have this formula, we can paste it across for the other projected periods. And of course, before we do that, don't forget to lock your reference to cell B21 by hitting F4. This will ensure that as you paste across for other periods, only that cell will be referenced. So hit Enter, then highlight all values for projected interest expense, and hit Control-R to paste the formula across. And now you'll see that you have this formula for each period. And if you go over to cell to B21 and input off, you get the value 0. Really, you can input any other value and you'll still get 0, but only ON turns interest expense back on. And what's nice about that is the next time your model refs out, and to recreate that scenario, we can just delete historical revenue and replace it. Rather than delete and relink interest expense, you can use your toggle to turn it off and back on, and your model will be fixed. And with that, you have a more elegant solution for circular references.